Tonight we have with us Bob Abbey. Bob is the director of the Bureau of Land Management. He tried a couple months in retirement and working as a private sector guy, but just couldn't stay there, especially when he had a call from the incoming Secretary of the Interior who said, we really need to have you go back to work to lead the Bureau of Land Management. Bob is a native not of the West, but of Mississippi. Still has a little bit of an accent every once in a while that you can sort of pick out. But he is the consummate professional in terms of a federal official, completely dedicated to the stewardship of the natural resources, and so skilled at understanding how to find that win-win solution that sometimes others of us give up on. He doesn't quit until he finds the right answer. You have his biographical information in the folders. I'm not going to go through that. What I'm really going to tell you is that this is a guy who is empathetic of those of you who work for the federal government out in the field sometimes probably feel undervalued and that taking risks may not be something that's in your best interest. Bob is an example of somebody who has proven that taking risks is the right thing to do, and you can, in fact, live through people who second-guess your decisions if you make those right kind of win-win decisions. I've always admired his ability to listen, to balance, and to bring out the best in people. He's greatly admired. I think one of the tremendous accomplishments he had is he led the implementation and a lot of the design of the Southern Nevada Public Lands Management Act. One of the most important experiments that I think we've taken about how to redeploy the assets we have in our public lands and put it to maximum use for the public, for protection of wildlife, for public recreation opportunities, and more. And I know Bob will probably share a little bit in terms of that side, but it wasn't an easy course. But the benefits, Las Vegas, a city that had essentially no trails when the Southern Nevada Public Land Management Act was passed, will end up being one of the easiest cities to move around without a car, on a bike, on your feet, or in heelys, I guess. But we're delighted that Bob has found time in his schedule to fly out here and be with us. And so I ask you to join me in welcoming Bob Abbey, the Director of the Bureau of Land Management.
Well, thank you, Derek, for the kind invitation, or the kind words and the invitation to be here. It's always a pleasure to come back to Parkers Outdoors. This is something that's been going on for about 20 years now, and there's always a good dialogue, and I learn something every time I come here. It's also good to be able to step up to a podium without falling down. Last week I was in Salt Lake City at a very contentious meeting. And going in, the room was packed, and I was following the governor of Utah up there to speak, and we were going to sit around this little podium. And as I was stepping up to the podium, someone called my name, and I turned around, but I kept walking, and I tripped. That was my entrance to that room. So I have learned now to watch where I walk. I don't take anything for granted. I know I'm getting a little older each year, and I just am not as, as limber as I once was. Derek, this is quite the place for a person from little Mississippi to show up and to see something like this. I was not expecting this type of facility. In fact, I got off the airport in Dallas, or the airplane in Dallas, and I took a cab out here, and I was responding to all the emails. As you fly, accumulate a lot of emails, and I was responding to the emails in the cab coming out here, and I didn't really look up until the taxi driver pulled into the entrance here, and then I looked up and I thought, holy mackerel, this is quite the place. And it is. And then I checked in, and then I came over to the convention center thinking it would be an easy little trek, and I would find this room fairly easily. And it's not that easy to find. You're almost in a map. But I do want to welcome all of you, and I know you've had others welcome you. The work that you do is important, and I want, like others, I'm sure, thank you for your service to the constituencies that you represent. It's important. These are important times for all of us in the United States of America. Derek has asked me to incorporate into some of my talking points what it's kind of like being an agency administrator, and I will kind of highlight some of that. But I also know that all of you in the room are leaders, and so there's very little that I can share with you relative to the skills that it takes or the values that you really need to have in order to be a success, because you are already successful. So I won't bore you with any advice or counsel, because you have done many, many wonderful things in your careers and in your life, and you have many more years left to do even more wonderful things. But Derek, let me say that it's already been quite the experience to walk in here. I met and see for the first time in, 30 years or so, Scott Jackson from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Scott and I worked together 32 years ago when I started my federal career with the Army Corps of Engineers at the Waterways Experiment Station in Vicksburg, Mississippi. Scott was one of a small little group of members of a recreation team there at West who hired me and got me started in the federal service. And I always remember the great times we had and the mentoring that Scott did and bringing me along and showing me the ropes, so to speak. And we were able to do some fabulous things during the years that I worked with him and the other team members. And then I went off and worked for the Bureau of Management. It's been a great experience as well, working with the BLM. You know, let me say that I feel extremely honored to have been asked to serve in the position that I hold. You know, when I, as Derek alluded to, I retired from the federal service in 2005, and I was in the private sector for a couple of years, actually for 4 years. And I was asked to come back to Washington, D.C. by Ken Salazar and talk to him about public lands and about the Bureau of Management in general, and just some general advice that I could share with him relative to about these public lands, the 245 million acres that are managed by the BLM on behalf of all Americans. And so I had the pleasure of sitting there with the Secretary and some of his senior leadership shortly after they took office, and I shared with him and them just the great opportunities that they had serving in the roles they were fortunate to hold of serving the American people, and the many, many opportunities that they would have during the years they served in that role to do some really wonderful things. And we talk about, you know, some of the things that this agency, the Bureau of Management, could and should be focusing on. And we talked about renewable energy. We talked about, you know, some of the restoration activities that were going on. We talked about, you know, some of the oil and gas reforms that we should entertain. We talked about, you know, the full spectrum of multiple use. And we talked about recreation use on public lands, which is a big, big activity that takes place on those 245 million acres. You know, the primary reason that I feel so humble about the role that I serve and so fortunate to hold this position is the 10,000 people that I get to come to work and interact with on each day. And I'm talking about the BLM employees, some of the most wonderful public servants that you find anywhere in government. BLM employees do great work, and more oftentimes than not, the work that they do, their best work, is done because they're empowered to take action that they believe is necessary without waiting on top-down direction. Because they're empowered to take action without waiting on top-down direction. You know, I knew that during my 27-year career with the Bureau of Management. I knew that some of the best things that we were able to accomplish was because of the partnerships that we had at the local level, the work that was going on at the local level, the collaborative nature of our work, and then to be able to focus on those things that were truly important, and not just because somebody said they were important. And so when I came back as the director of the Bureau of Management, and that was after 2 sessions, actually 3 sessions, with the Secretary of Interior, because the first time he asked, would I have an interest in being the director, I said no. The second time, I said, well, maybe we could talk a little longer. And the third time, I was convinced that this was an opportunity of a lifetime. And I haven't regretted accepting that last offer that was presented to me. And I haven't regretted that because we are doing good things and have always done good things. Each of you have done good things in the agencies and in the private sector that you might work for. But there is still, as much as we take pride in our past work, our best work is yet to come. And as I look and have this fortunate opportunity to work with 10,000 employees, some of the best public servants in the world, I see that. I see, the more senior employees that have been around for a while, what they have brought, what they still desire to bring. And then in my interactions with employees across the nation, I also see the young up-and-comers, those people that are just now joining public service. The enthusiasm, the dedication, and the commitment that they bring into public service is really a joy to observe, and it keeps someone like me going. If you are ever asked to serve in a presidential appointed position, give it some serious consideration, and then run like hell. Because, and I'm just teasing, of course, because the job is not easy by any means. The hours are long, the expectations are high, and you try your very best to do your very best. It all started with the vetting process. I was fairly naive. I'd been a career employee with the Bureau of Land Management, along with my experience with the Army Corps of Engineers and also the state park system in Mississippi. But I had never served in a political appointed position. And even though I've served with Secretaries of Interiors and other bureau directors for a number of years, I never served in a political appointed position. And so the vetting process took me by surprise. First and foremost, it took 3 months to review my credentials, for the FBI to do the background checks and then share all that information with the White House. The White House then does a secondary interview, which takes about 8 hours. Because again, they don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want anyone coming into these roles that are not qualified to hold, or that doesn't have a vision, that doesn't necessarily know what needs to be done without direction from them. Because they too want to empower you to go out and do the best and be the best. 3 months. That's not unusual. That's about average for anyone that's going to hold a president-appointed position that's going to have to be confirmed by the U.S. Senate. But a lot of things happen during that period of time when you're first asked to come into this type of role, and then by the time you're confirmed as a U.S. Senate, by the U.S. Senate, and by the time you actually come into the position, in my case as the Director of the Bureau of Land Management, they weren't sitting around waiting for me to come on board. They were busy moving forward with a very, very aggressive agenda. And I share the timeline with you because by the time a Bureau Director is appointed and then confirmed, there's a lot of work. It's already been taking place. It's already underway. And the agenda has pretty much been set. And some of the decisions have been reached prior to you coming on board. And that's the work that you're going to be doing, at least during the first year of your tenure. You're going to be implementing decisions that someone else had already been made. In my case, the Secretary of Interior had already drafted out his priorities for the Bureau of Land Management. We talked about things like the new energy frontier, climate change. We talked about other topics like treasured landscapes, engaging America's youth. When I came on board, I also added to this list of priority items. And then I got to continue the dialogue, continue working on the relationship with Secretary Ken Salazar, and he's the real deal. For those of you who have not met Secretary Salazar, he's the real deal. And even though he's held political positions in the past, most recently as a U.S. Senator before being appointed by President Obama as Secretary of Interior, he's a public servant, and that's very dear to him.